Every single day, in kitchens all over this country, people take last night's dinner, put it back in the microwave or the oven, and press start without knowing that for a small handful of everyday foods, that second trip through high heat quietly changes their chemistry into something the body was never designed to process. It isn't the food going bad. It isn't food poisoning. It's something slower and stranger, and almost nobody explains it in plain language. A quick note before we go any further. This channel is for general education, not medical advice, and we are not your doctor. Nothing here is a diagnosis or a prescription. Always talk with your own doctor before changing anything about your diet or your health routine. With that said, we're a research desk that spends its time reading the actual studies, the oncology journals, the food chemistry papers, the government food safety data, and translating them into plain English so you get the why, not just a headline. Today we're walking through 5 common foods where reheating is the part nobody warns you about, and by the end you'll know exactly which habits to quietly drop tonight. Stay with us for number 1. It has nothing to do with the food itself, and almost everyone in America does it without a second thought. Before we get into the list, tell us in the comments how old you are and what state you're watching from. We read every one, and it shapes what we cover next. Here's the piece almost nobody explains clearly. Heat doesn't just warm food up, it drives chemical reactions. Sugars react with proteins, fats break down, and in a handful of foods, the molecules that make them up get rearranged into new compounds, some of which the International Agency for Research on Cancer, the cancer research arm of the World Health Organization, has studied closely enough to classify by risk level. Think of your stovetop the way you'd think of a campfire that's already burned down. Relight it, and you don't just get the same fire back, you kick up new smoke, new soot, different byproducts than the first time it burned. Reheating certain foods works the same way. The first cooking already changed the food once. The second high heat pass can change it again, and this time, in a handful of documented cases, the new byproducts are the ones oncologists actually pay attention to. That's the lens for everything on this list, not this food is dangerous, but this specific habit, done over and over, adds up in ways your body has to quietly deal with. Number 5 on our list is one almost nobody thinks about, because it isn't really about food at all, it's about oil. If you cook with the same pan of oil more than once, frying eggs in it Monday, then using that same oil again Wednesday, you're reheating something that's already been chemically stressed. Here's the mechanism. Cooking oil is mostly unsaturated fat, and unsaturated fat is fragile. Every time you heat it past its smoke point, some of those fat molecules break apart and reform into new compounds, aldehydes, and a compound called acrolein, the same irritant that makes your eyes water over a campfire. Picture the oil like a rubber band. Stretch it once, it mostly snaps back. Stretch it, heat it, and stretch it again and again, and eventually it doesn't spring back the same way it degrades. A widely cited body of food chemistry research, including work published in food science journals reviewed by the World Health Organization's Food Safety Program, has found that repeatedly reheated cooking oils show rising concentrations of these breakdown compounds, and animal studies have linked high aldehyde diets to markers of oxidative stress, one of the pathways researchers study in relation to long-term disease risk. The fix is almost embarrassingly simple. Use a fresh, light pour of oil each time you fry. Keep the heat moderate rather than smoking hot, and if oil ever turns dark or smells sharp, that's your sign. It's already broken down. Into the sink it goes, not back into the pan. That one habit alone quietly removes an entire category of reheating risk from your kitchen, and it sets up the next item. Because the same principle, heat plus time equals new chemistry, is about to show up somewhere far more familiar. Number 4 is starchy food. Reheated until it's crispy leftover fries, roasted potatoes, or bread thrown back in a hot oven or air fryer until the edges turn deep golden brown or dark. Pay attention to this one, because it's one of the most common habits in American kitchens. Here's what's happening inside that potato or that slice of toast. Starchy foods are rich in a natural sugar called asparagine and simple sugars. When you expose them to high dry heat, especially past about 250 degrees Fahrenheit. Those two react together in what food chemists call the Maillard reaction, the same browning reaction that makes toast taste good. But past a certain point, that same reaction also produces a compound called acrylamide. Think of it like toasting marshmallows. A light golden marshmallow is sweet and safe. Push it past golden into black, and you've created something entirely different in the char. Acrylamide is exactly that black marshmallow compound, just invisible. The International Agency for Research on Cancer classifies acrylamide as a group 2, a substance probably carcinogenic to humans, based primarily on animal studies, with human evidence still considered limited and associational rather than proven. The U.S. Food and Drug Administration and European food safety regulators have both issued formal guidance on this, because reheating is one of the biggest contributors. A food that was only lightly browned the first time around often gets pushed into that deeper, riskier zone the second time in the air fryer or the broiler, chasing that satisfying crunch. The fix isn't to avoid potatoes and toast forever, it's to reheat them at a lower temperature for a little longer and stop the moment they're golden, not the moment they're dark. That single timing habit keeps you on the safe side of a line most people cross without realizing it. Number 3, moves from starch to something a lot of families reheat without thinking twice: cured and processed meats. Bacon, hot dogs, deli ham, sausage links, warmed back up in a hot pan until they're sizzling and a little charred at the edges. Here's the mechanism, and it's worth slowing down for. Processed meats are cured with nitrites, which is exactly why they're pink instead of gray and why they don't spoil as fast. Under high heat, those nitrites can react with natural compounds in the meat called amines, and that reaction produces a family of compounds called nitrosamines. Picture nitrites as a stable lock and high heat as the key that finally turns it. The reaction barely happens at room temperature, but a hot pan is exactly the environment it needs. The International Agency for Research on Cancer already classifies processed meat as a group 1 carcinogen, meaning there's strong, consistent human evidence linking regular consumption to colorectal cancer risk, and separate published research specifically on nitrosamine formation has found that higher cooking temperatures, including the second high heat pass of reheating, measurably increase nitrosamine concentration compared to a single, gentler cook. That doesn't mean one reheated hot dog is a health emergency. The actual risk research is about consistent, repeated exposure over years, not a single meal. But it does mean the habit of routinely searing leftover bacon or sausage back to crispy is quietly working against you in a way a single fresh serving isn't. The safer move: reheat processed meats gently a covered pan on low, or the microwave rather than back onto a hot, dry skillet until they're blistered and charred. That brings us to number 2, and this is where the pattern from every item so far comes together in one habit. Reheating meat that's already been grilled, pan-seared, or broiled steak, chicken thighs, burger patties back to that deeply browned, almost blackened state. This is the item that ties the whole list together because it produces 2 compound families at once. High, direct heat on meat protein forms heterocyclic amines, sometimes just called HCAs, when amino acids and creatine, a natural compound in muscle tissue, react together at high temperature. And when fat drips and flares or chars against a hot surface, it produces a second family called polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons, or PAHs, the same class of compound found in cigarette smoke and vehicle exhaust, which tells you something about why researchers take it seriously. Here's the analogy that makes it click. Think of muscle fibers like a sponge, and high heat like wringing that sponge out hard. The first wring already released some of what's inside. Wring it out a second time at high heat, and you're forcing out compounds that weren't fully released the first time, right onto the char. The National Cancer Institute, part of the U.S. National Institutes of Health, has published research summaries noting that both HCAs and PAHs have been shown to be mutagenic in laboratory studies, meaning they can damage DNA, and that diets high in well-done, charred meat are associated, not proven to directly cause, with increased colorectal, pancreatic, and prostate cancer risk in observational human studies. Reheating charred leftovers is chemically a second exposure to the exact same heat process that created those compounds the first time. The safer approach: reheat meat gently, covered at a lower temperature so you're warming it through rather than re-searing the crust. And if you're reheating in a pan, add a splash of water or broth and put a lid on it, which keeps the temperature down and the moisture up. Before we get to number one, the one almost nobody connects to this topic at all, if this is helping so far, type the number 5 inches the comments. It helps this reach more people who reheat their leftovers exactly like this every single day without knowing it. And here is number 1, the item we teased at the very start, and it's the one that surprises people most, because it isn't a food at all, it's what the food sits in. Reheating meals in plastic containers, or covering a plate with plastic wrap and microwaving it directly. Here's the mechanism in plain terms. Many plastics, especially older containers and thin cling wraps, are made with compounds like phthalates and, in some, bisphenol A BPA. Those compounds aren't chemically locked into the plastic forever. Heat, and especially fat and oil in your food, act like a solvent. They help pull those compounds loose from the plastic and into whatever you're about to eat. Picture the plastic like a sponge that's been soaked in a dye, run hot water and a little oil over it, and some of that dye is going to bleed out, whether you can see it happening or not. Phthalates and BPA are what researchers call endocrine disruptors. They can mimic or interfere with the body's own hormones, particularly estrogen. The National Institute of Environmental Health Sciences, a division of the NIH, has funded and published a substantial body of research on this exact exposure pathway, and separately, the American Cancer Society's own published guidance specifically notes that while the research connecting BPA and phthalate exposure to hormone-related cancers like breast and prostate cancer is still considered limited and not conclusive in humans, the biological mechanism hormone disruption is well established enough that public health agencies in the US and Europe have already restricted BPA in products like baby bottles as a precaution. That's an important distinction to sit with. This isn't a settled plastic causes cancer claim, and we're not going to pretend it is. It's an honest, the mechanism is real, the human cancer data is still developing, and the safer choice costs you nothing situation. The fix is almost too simple to believe. Transfer leftovers into a glass or ceramic dish before microwaving. And if you're covering a plate, use a paper towel or a glass lid instead of plastic wrap, resting directly on hot food. That one swap, done every single time you reheat something, removes an entire exposure pathway from your kitchen for the rest of your life, and it costs you exactly the 10 seconds it takes to pull out a different dish. Let's bring this together with someone whose situation makes this concrete. Consider a woman in her late 60s. Call her Diane, the kind of person these habits are studied in. Diane had reheated her lunch in the same plastic container for almost 15 years. Always on high power, always with the lid still on. She'd also gotten into the habit, after her husband passed, of cooking bacon once a week and reheating the leftovers in a hot skillet until they were good and crispy, the way she liked them. None of this was reckless. It's exactly how millions of people cook. When her doctor mentioned during a routine visit that hormone-related cancer risk factors are partly about cumulative, repeated exposure rather than any single meal, Diane made 2 small changes. She switched to a glass container for the microwave, and she started reheating meat gently, covered, instead of re-crisping it. Nothing about her life got harder. She didn't give up bacon, and she didn't throw out her leftovers. She just changed the container and the temperature, and that's really the whole doctrine of this video in miniature. So here's why all 5 of these work the same way underneath the specific chemistry. It was never really about the food. It's about heat, repeated, past a certain threshold, whether that threshold is a smoking pan of old oil, a potato pushed past golden into dark, a hot dog seared until it blisters, a steak recharred at the edges, or a plastic container run through the microwave on high again and again. Your body already handles small amounts of these compounds every day. That's not new information, and it's not a reason to panic about a single meal. What actually moves long-term risk, according to the research we've walked through, is the habit repeated over years, not the exception, and we want to say this clearly because it matters. None of this means throw out your leftovers, and none of this is a reason to stop eating bacon or potatoes or steak. It means change the method, not the menu. Reheat gently instead of re-crisping. Swap the plastic for glass. Toss oil that's already been used hard instead of reusing it a third time. Those 4 small habits, done consistently, are the entire takeaway tonight's plan. If you want it in one sentence, pick 1 container swap and 1 reheating temperature change, and just do those 2 things starting with your very next leftover meal. Before you go, which of these 5 surprised you the most? Tell us below. Your answer genuinely helps the next person who reads it decide what to change first. And if this explains something your own doctor never had the 10 minutes to walk you through, consider sending it to someone in your family who reheats their coffee, their bacon, or their takeout container exactly the way we just described. It helps this reach more people who need it, and it costs you nothing but a share. One more thing before we close, because it matters just as much as anything else in this video. None of this is a reason to change your medications, your diet, or any treatment plan on your own. Always run any real health concern past your own doctor or pharmacist who knows your specific history. What we've walked through today is the why behind 5 small kitchen habits, but there's a 6th one hiding in plain sight, in something almost every household has in the pantry right now, and it has nothing to do with heat at all. That's exactly what we're covering next. Watch that one right after this.